For people living in Eastern Canada, the anxiously awaited so-called Atlantic bubble has been announced. Starting July 3rd, residents of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador will be able to cross each other's interprovincial borders without having to self-isolate for 14 days. They'll still have to follow public health guidelines in those provinces, but how exactly will the bubble work, and why is now the right time? Blaine Higgs is the Premier of New Brunswick. He's joining us from Fredericton. Stephen McNeil is the Premier of Nova Scotia, and he joins us from Halifax. Hi, Premiers. Good to see you and have you on the show together.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Vashi.
Premier McNeil, why don't I start with you? All three, I've interviewed both of you on this subject, the prospect of an Atlantic bubble. Why do you feel like the region is ready as of July 3rd?
Well, we've been following the epidemiology around the region. I speak for Nova Scotia. You know, we are now on our 15th day where we've not any new cases. We are seeing the opening of our economy with the restaurants and other businesses that we closed. The public health protocols are in place, are being followed properly. So this is the appropriate time, we believe, to open up activity and movement in around Atlantic Canada.
Premier Higgs, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are just about 20 active cases in New Brunswick. How are you also, feeling like July 3rd is going to be okay, or do you have a bit of concern about those active cases?
Well, we've had the situation contained. We did have some problems in the one region of the province, but it was contained. The contact tracing was very effective, and any cases that came out of that have been related. So we feel good about that. And the last few days certainly been good in that sense. Numbers are going down. I think we're about 16 today. Total cases. So yeah, we're feeling good about July 3rd, and as Premier McNeil says, it's time to get our economy moving. It's time for letting people, get around our province. We've had a situation of lockdown for several months, and so it's a good news story, but it's giving people hope that we're going to get back to living with COVID and manage to work through this.
Premier McNeil, how much of a difference economically do you think this will make? And I take note for our audience that, of course, right across the country, the tourism sector has been hit incredibly hard. Opening up the bubble, opening up the borders in the Atlantic region, will that make enough of a difference?
Well, it's a good first step. We've all said this is the first step for us, so we'll see how that works in Atlantic Canada. We'll follow the epidemiology following the opening of July 3rd, and then hope to open up to the rest of Canada in mid-July to the third week of July. But economically, this is an important step for the region. Blaine and I share a border. Premier Higgs and I share a border. People go back and forth for commerce, go back and forth for healthcare services. So it's a little bit of getting people back to some normal life. And we, people have cottages in either one of our provinces or family. It's been tough isolating them from one another. So it's really a step of, yes, economically, it'll be a good thing for our tourism industry and our economy in general. But it's also a good thing for our families having the ability to reconnect.
Premier McNeil, if I could, I just follow up. You said something about opening to the rest of Canada. Mid-July, you're anticipating?
So we're hoping, I'll speak for our province, we're hoping, somewhere 2 weeks or a little bit after the Atlantic bubble. That's what we're following the epidemiology. If you go back to when we started this journey, when we started to open up our economy, we said we'd be about a month opening up to the rest of the region, which is approximately July 3rd will be a month. In that month, we made a number of changes, opening up our own economy to Nova Scotians. This is the first step of going beyond our own border, and then the next step will be certainly to the rest of Canada.
Premier Higgs, is it your intention to do the same thing?
Well, we're hopeful to be obviously in the same position, so this is the first start to that. And we'll watch closely, the differences. I think getting back to being a nation, as I've said before, is important to reflect a number of areas in the industry, to get the airlines up and moving, to get people connecting across the country again. The opening of the border to the U.S. Brings additional challenges, and I think that that's something the federal government has put on until restricted border to the U.S. until July 21st, I think.
Correct.
So that'll be another call to make at that time, how we see that happening. But being able to move in the end of July, or say the middle to the third week of July, we're hopeful this bubble will work well. We'll see movement here that's successful through our Atlantic provinces, and it will allow us to give us the confidence to look across the country and keep moving.
And just to clarify, Premier Higgs, for anyone watching now who's dreaming of a vacation now in either of in other provinces, in either of your provinces, when you do eventually open up the borders outside to other provinces, will that mean, Premier Higgs, that those who come visit will not have to self-isolate for 2 weeks?
That would be our goal, as we be in a position, when we open up to the rest of the country, that people can move freely through our country. I think we have been more restricted in the Atlantic region, and we've watched it very closely and walked through borders very closely for a reason. So we have to watch the bigger centres, in Montreal and Toronto, and see where that happens over the coming weeks. But yes, the goal would be that we would be able to get free movement back and forth within our nation.
Before I let both of you go, I do want to ask you about the federal government and the relationship with the provinces right now. We usually talk to you before the First Minister's call, which I believe will happen tomorrow night. If I have my days right, it's Wednesday now. Premier McNeil, I've been trying to get as much information as I can about this $14 billion. And just for our viewers, that's the amount of money the feds say that they're willing to transfer to the provinces, but in 7 very specific areas, for example, like testing and tracing or childcare. Where do things stand in those discussions from your perspective? Why isn't the money flowing? Have the provinces not agreed to what the feds have laid out? What can you tell us?
So I think each province, is appreciative of the amount of dollars we're talking about, but I think all of us want flexibility in those buckets. The 7 headlines that you just identified, all of us would have different needs in our respective provinces. So what we're looking for from the national government is really flexibility. Some of the things that are on that list would be fully paid for by the federal government out of that $14 billion. And the rest of it will be some of it would be cost shared with provinces. In our case, we'd be looking for the investments that we've already made to be part of that cost sharing. We've kept our childcare sector intact during this period of time, even though there was we haven't closed. We're paying the entire bill to make sure that they would be here when we started opening up our economy. So there's things like that, negotiations going back and forth. But I think we all want the flexibility to respond to the specific needs of our own provinces. And it's also allowed us to start a conversation with the national government about healthcare funding in general. And that's beyond just COVID. When this started out, it was a 50-50 deal. 50 cents of every dollar is paid for by the federal government. In our case, it's pretty close to 20 cents on the dollar today. We think due to COVID and potentially any other virus that may show up, it's highlighted the fact that we need the national government there to have a different negotiation when it comes to how we fund healthcare across the country.
Premier Higgs, I get all of that, and certainly various premiers have made the case for increased flexibility. Is the federal government, from your perspective, any closer to providing that flexibility? Or I am really trying to get at why there hasn't been an agreement reached, because it's been a number of weeks now since the federal government has said, here's $14 billion.
It does require, individual provinces have individual priorities. And I think that the biggest challenge here is that we're thinking beyond just today. And so, yeah, there are different views. Flexibility is the key one. I think every provincial leader agrees that if we had more flexibility, the deal would be done. And let us focus on the priorities that are going to have the largest impact on our individual provinces to get up and running. Let's look at sustainability beyond just this year, because what happens, we don't know how long the COVID situation is going to last. But to Premier McNeil's point about healthcare funding, that we're all in about 20 cents on a dollar, which wasn't the original formula, and we're all challenged with increased healthcare costs. That didn't start with COVID, and it's not going to end with the COVID vaccine. But these are challenges that are facing us. The infrastructure, the same thing. Let's look at costs that we're incurring every year to upgrade, to look after assets, to manage our future costs in a way that doesn't bring more taxes onto people and higher costs of living in our respective provinces. That's the challenge. Flexibility is the key. We're appreciative, most certainly, of the dollars, but we need to be able to focus on the things that will have the largest impact on our respective provinces. It should be a reasonable formula to develop, but it's proven to be a bit of a challenge.
Okay, I'll leave it there. I'm out of time. Either of you going to visit the other's province as of July 3rd?
Hopefully so, yes, or thereafter.
I don't know if I'm there on July 3rd, but I'm sure I'll see beautiful New Brunswick sometime in the summer. Listen, Blaine, I do want to give a shout out. Blaine and his province had Premier Higgs, I should say, at an outbreak in Campbellton. They did a great job of isolating that, and it gave a lot of confidence to Atlantic Canadians, the ability for this virus to live with this virus. So to his team, well done.
All right.
Thank you, Stephen.
Nice to see the interprovincial relationships. Thanks so much, Premiers. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you, Vashi.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.